The date is April 1st, 2011. This is Leon Matthews with Res Ramblings, and I wanted to share some more about Haskell Indian Nations University. And at some point, I'm going to share with you about the Carlisle Indian School that was started in 1879 by Richard Henry Pratt. And I just wanted to share a little bit about Haskell because, you know, it's part of the history of Native America and how we came to the place that we are today. And I had a friend that, you know, basically talks about, you know, not being a part of that history. But yet, and then because we're alive today, and I was with a coach for the Nebraska Cornhuskers a few years ago, and he asked me that same question. And he said, you know, how can you deal with the past? Because it's like the people that are living today didn't have anything to do with that. And that's a very true statement. You know, the surrounding communities around reservations seem to have the most difficult time with the American Indians. And the further you move away, the better people are towards Native American issues and the things they've had to deal with. But recognizing that there is a past. You know, I've always been a proponent that believes that in order to move forward, you have to deal with your past. And you have to come to grips because it's affecting the present. And so, yes, all the people today don't have anything to do with the past. But I sit here and I realize that the policies of the United States government have affected my life. And, you know, in my family life. I grew up in the city because of relocation and assimilation, where they were still trying to kill the Indian and save the man. They wanted to train my father in the industrial arts, and he became an automatic transmissions expert back in California in 65, 66. And then he lost his bout with alcohol, because in 1979 he was 37 years old, and he had a heart attack, and it was through complications of just drinking whiskey every day, you know, and not just a little bit of whiskey, but a lot of whiskey. But they sent him out there, and my dad didn't last. You know, he died a young life, his mid to late 30s, and that affects me as a human being. So although I don't have anything to do with the past, my siblings don't have anything to do with the past, the people on the reservations don't have anything to do with the past, we're still affected by it. And the non-Indian people that didn't have anything to do with the past, you know, can live their lives out realizing that they didn't do those things. But yet my people, the people living on Pine Ridge, the people that are living in Navajo, the people living in Hopi and Arapaho and, you know, and Rosebud and all these different places, you know, are affected by the policies of the United States government. Well, in 1984, or actually 1984, in 1884, the United States developed an industrial training school, and it was a boarding school, and it had 15 students, grades 1 through 5, and the emphasis was on assimilation, and they were teaching the students to become members of the American society. And by 1887, the name changed to Haskell Institute because of a United States congressman named Dudley Haskell. And he was the person that actually went to, or brought Haskell to Lawrence, Kansas, which is kind of a central point, for a lot of different tribes, the Oklahoma tribes as well as the Northern Plains tribes. It was more central than any other place, and so it was a good location for what they wanted to do. And in 1894, they had 606 students from 36 different states. By 1927, they began offering college classes, including normal school, which is kind of an interesting phrase. But what is normal, other than, making children not speak their language and taking them away from their families and basically seeking to destroy every ounce of what it meant to be a member of a tribe. And so by 1965, the last high school class was graduated. That was the year I was born, so it's going to be 46 years, or 45 years, because I'm actually 45, but it will be 46 years this year. And so in 1970, the Haskell Indian Junior College became accredited, and through some college, board. But in 1993, they added the Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education and changed the name to Haskell Indian Nations University. So, you have the history of Haskell Indian Nations University, and I have to tell you, traveling down to Haskell and walking around the campus and seeing the different tribes and getting to know different people, it's been a really great experience for me as a parent who has a daughter that's studying for a bachelor's degree in elementary education. And one of the things that's really interesting is that it's a beautiful campus. I mean, they had a lot of, there's a lot of history there. They have a great stadium, a great gymnasium to play basketball. And, at one time, Haskell was one of the best, football teams in the country. They were known as the Fighting Indians, and they played in the Midlands Collegiate Athletic Conference and an independent circuit in football, and they left the Central States Football League in 2006. But they actually played, they were able to, from 1900 to 1930, they were a powerhouse in football, because Indian athletes were going there and they were just overrunning teams, and it was very good history in some things, but there's also a dark side. They basically, it was kind of like a semi-military school where they would bring children in and they would make them march to classes and march to lunch and march to bed, and and they tried to kill the Indian. They tried to assimilate the students so that they would become good citizens, and they trained them in industrial arts, things like agriculture and I'm sure carpentry and things like that, which I heard someone say today, that, well, don't you think that's a good thing, that they give you a trade? But it wasn't about the trade as much as it was about killing the Indian and trying to destroy who that person was as a human being, as a person that God created. Instead of reaching in and seeking to find the image of God, they sought to destroy the image of God. And it's like they dehumanized our people, trying to kill that spirit, and making them cut their hair, and making them not allowing them to speak their own language, and basically destroying them. And in the post that I put up on resramblings.org, blogspot.com today, I basically said, if you want to feel, what I wanted to get across was, if you want to feel what the Indians felt, try thinking about someone coming and taking your children today and saying, you can no longer speak your language, you cannot pray the way your grandfathers prayed, you cannot dress the way you dressed, you have to do this, and all these rules, seeking to destroy every part of that person, and then making them into something, where they'll never be accepted as a brown-skinned person in a dominant European American culture. And so, here we are. I'm showing you pictures of my family, my nephew and my 3 nieces and my daughter Tammy, my wife Belva, and they're looking and they're feeling, trying to understand what happened. If you go to the north or the southeast corner of the campus, and I have to say it's a beautiful campus, but you go to the back corner, there's a graveyard. And this graveyard is filled with babies, filled with children. And the children, most likely became sick and died. And how would you feel if they came to take your child to a boarding school and then they wrote you a letter and said, I'm sorry, Mr. So-and-so, but your child is dead? How would that make you feel? This is what happened to the American Indian. This is the history that we've had to come through, that we've had to overcome. And it's like in the situation that we're in and the context that we're in today is directly affected by the past that our grandfathers lived. And it's a destructive thing. And it's, in my mind, I think, here are these people that are walking on the reservation and they're trying to live their lives and they've been affected by the history of the United States of America government. And it's not a pretty picture. And it's like, we have people that are so colonized that they begin to think that they're less, when in reality they need to take a hold of who they are as people. And I struggled with this history, and I plan to eventually take a trip to Carlisle, maybe just taking pictures from a distance, but nevertheless going there and seeing how far this place was, because in Carlisle the first students were relatives of Red Cloud and relatives of Spotted Tail. These were chiefs of the Rosebud Sioux tribe and the Oglalas. The Sichangu was Spotted Tail and Red Cloud was our chief. And they sent their kids all these miles and miles and miles away. And one person, a good friend of mine, Sandra, she said, I have to try to help her to understand that all people are equal. There are none better, none worse. And we were talking about the slavery and how the African Americans had to go through this slavery. And I said, well, what about our people? What did they do there? And she said, they tried to enslave you too. But the only thing is they ran away. The Indians wouldn't handle that slavery. They would just take off, and they'd rather die than become slaves in the fields, to pick cotton. But where was the Africans going to run back to? They were taken across a water that where many of them they were so sickly that when they got to the Bahamas, they would just dump bodies into the bay there to dispose of them. And so many people died. So much history has been done. And it's like, and today, we have to realize that these these children should not die in vain. And the parents, I mean, I know that I lost a child, and it was very, very difficult for me. Very difficult for my wife. And to think of a 5-year-old kid, a 3-year-old child, you know, or 4 or 5-year-old child, you know, dying in a place where they didn't have a mother and a father. You know, it's very difficult for me to overcome that. Realizing that my own people are struggling on a day-to-day basis, trying to survive, trying to get enough food, trying to get enough money for cigarettes and for alcohol. And, you know, where in a lot of places, the people that didn't have anything to do with this don't even have to think about those things. They don't have to worry about what they're going to eat that night, let alone what they're going to eat next week or tomorrow. They're worried about today. And I believe until we begin to look at, you know, the effect of what the boarding schools have done to our people, we're going to continue to struggle. And, you know, and I find, you know, for me, my faith in Christ has brought me through so much anger and so much pain. And it's brought me to a healthier place. And that's really what I have to offer. But it's like I still believe that I can't even have people understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a Savior, Wanikia, because they're so concerned about what they're going to eat that day. And we cannot go back and say, well, you know what, that was then and this is now. Because you know what, this now is affected directly by then. And we're living in a time where people are dying. And their food is terrible. It's rotting. We have one grocery store. We have 40,000 people on the reservation. And the food that's at the grocery store is rotting. Just to give you one example, I had a 2-week-old onion. And I just had one, but I needed 3 onions. I was cooking. And so I went to the store and I got two onions, and I slid it into the first one, and it was rotted. It was black. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll have a better luck with the big onion. So I cut that in half, and it was rotted. So I had to peel away all that rot. It was a 2 rotted onions. But yet I had a 2-week-old onion from Rapid City. 2-week-old. And it was perfect. It made me cry. It was so perfect. But the onions that I had here, that I got from this store here, they were rotted. And it's like, and I paid an expensive price for 2 rotted onions. And it's like, this is what's happening to us, is that we don't even have the abilities to not shop there. And the store that is located right in my village would not last a week anywhere else with the type of food that they have and the prices that they offer. These things need to change. And we have to understand, it's just like Kelsey, when she's looking at that grave, that tombstone, and she's touching it. And I looked at her and I thought, you know what? This is a little girl, an Indian girl, that may not fully understand what went on there then, but she's a picture of who died there. And Belva, you know, being a mother of a mother who lost her child. Tammy, you know, who lost her sister. And my nieces and nephew who lost a cousin. And to think of these children dying alone in a cold, dark place where they were treated as less than human. And they wanted to destroy them. Destroy the soul of the Indian. And that's injustice. I believe it's an injustice that we need to understand. We need to grow. Yes, we need to grow. We need to move forward. We need to do things that are going to be positive for the future generations. You know, Haskell is a place that's wonderful. It has about 1,000 students. It offers 3 bachelors. Bachelor in science, bachelor in elementary ed, and in business, and I think they have an American Indian Studies program. Here's a place that we need to take a hold of as American Indians and become the best of the best, you know, and send all of our students there, you know, and have them compete at the highest levels in college, get the best grades, you know. But today, you know, they have a 9% dropout rate. No, 9% graduation rate. I mean, flip that around. Out of the 100 kids that start off there as freshmen, only 9 of them graduate. And why? It's because of the past, and we have to overcome the past. So this is Leon Matthews with Res Ramblings on April Fool's Day, and I hope you guys are having a great day, and you have a good weekend. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.